Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. My name is D.K. Bhattacharya. We are going to talk about Middle Paleolithic culture of Europe today. But it should be remembered that before we talk about Middle Paleolithic, Lower Paleolithic or Upper Paleolithic culture, it should be very clearly understood these are analyst approach to the past. Nobody living in Middle Paleolithic culture knew that his culture will be in future called as Middle Paleolithic culture. So obviously these are our convenience. We divide Lower Paleolithic as separate from Middle Paleolithic and Middle Paleolithic separate from Upper Paleolithic. Having said as much, we come to the point of Europe. Now we have, like earlier time, decided to divide Europe into four ecocultural zones. Western Europe, the area which is west of the river Rhine, and Central Europe, which is a long landmass which goes from almost entire Germany, Czechoslovakia, Austria, Switzerland, Hungary, and also Poland. And then you have a small extension in the southeast area which goes from Yugoslavia, erstwhile Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, and Greece. These are called Balkan states. And then across this, in the eastern part, including most of Ukraine, White Russia, Belarus, are called Eastern Europe. Having said as much, Europe having four ecocultural zones, we'll start examining the Middle Paleolithic evidence of Western Europe first. It is well known that the term Mousterian tradition, as given by Gabriel de Bortolet, was given from a site called La Moustière, which is in Western Europe, which is in France. So Mousterian is a name that comes as the alternate to what is called as Middle Paleolithic culture. Having said as much, we have to go back to an issue that was raised in 1960s by Professor Francois Booth. He suddenly said that no, Mousterian is not a single tradition. There seems to be some kind of heterogeneity in it, and we'll try to do what is known as multivariate analysis. So he tried to do a multivariate analysis of the material that came from Middle Paleolithic. And after having done that multivariate analysis, he proved that what was earlier called as Mousterian seems to be a combination of four different traditions. And these four different traditions were called Mousterian of Sarentian tradition, typical Mousterian, Mousterian of Acheulean tradition, and of course Mousterian of Denticulate tradition. So these are the four different traditions that were identified and enunciated by Professor Francois Booth. So instead of what was called Mousterian by Henry Abbé-Broye, now we have four traditions and not one tradition, which constitutes the Middle Paleolithic of Western Europe. Then comes a site, again Francois Booth discovers a site called Combigrenal. It's a rock shelter. And there are 63 cultural layers, and each one of them having either of these or one of the other of these four traditions. But since these four traditions do not have any kind of sequential occurrence, Professor Booth went on to say these are parallel traditions. These four traditions are occurring parallelly in Western Europe. Professor Binford, Louis Robert Binford from California, he came and said, no, I can't believe that four parallel traditions can survive without influencing each other. Anyways, then he did an alternate statistics and tried to prove, no, these are four different adaptational strategies of the same ethnic group. So these are not four different ethnic groups. The dispute continues. Let us accept that there are four varieties of Mousterian, and whether they are parallel or not, we will not dispute anymore because there is still discussions going on. So we accept that the mainstay of Middle Paleolithic of Western Europe is four traditions of Mousterian. There was a site called Gudenius Cave, which came from Spain. And this site had diminutive cleavers. Now, the cleaver is a lower Paleolithic tool type, and since it had diminutive cleaver, again Francois Booth said, no, this doesn't look to be similar to general Western European Mousterian. We would like to call it by a different name. He did the same thing, if you remember, for the lower Paleolithic of Spain. He called it the Acheulean of Meridionalis tradition or Mediterranean tradition because it had a lot of cleavers. So he likewise for the Middle Paleolithic of Gudenius Cave, he gave the name the Vasconian culture. So they said, no, these are not Mousterian, these are Vasconian. So we have therefore two varieties of Middle Paleolithic, one clustered variety called Mousterian groups in France, and then the Gudenius group in Switzerland, in Spain. Let us cross the channel and go to England. Now this is all of it is the Western Europe. In England, we have a cave site called Pinhole Cave. And in the Pinhole Cave, we find a succession of Middle Paleolithic culture, which is very similar to the French Middle Paleolithic or Mousterian. Beautiful Mousterian points, beautiful side scrapers, and so on. But hand axes continue to occur along with this. Now, this is a scenario which is a little different from France. In French Mousterian, hand axes stop and flake tools begin. So you can distinctly see a demarcation of the development of Middle Paleolithic. That doesn't happen in England. Hand axes continue, though Middle Paleolithic also begin. So if you take the whole of Western Europe together, you have Combegrenal in France, Godenus in Spain, and of course Pinhole in England, and together you find a very different development. So you can't even talk of Middle Paleolithic having a single cultural variety in Western Europe. Such a narrow landmass, but yet the cultural variety seems to be in itself regional. France having its own character of 4 traditions of Mousterian, Spain having Godenus, and then go across the channel, then you have what is hand axes continuing with the Mousterian tool types. We must talk about something else. Once you cross Western Europe and come to Central Europe or other parts of Europe, we will refer to the word we'll use the word Mousteroid to mean which is similar to the Combegrenal kind of occurrence. That means very beautiful Mousterian points, very beautiful level of flakes. So if you have an assemblage where you have large amount of these Mousterian varieties, then we call it Mousteroid Middle Paleolithic. Now, having said as much, let us cross over and come to Central Europe. As you know, Central Europe is a large landmass. We first go to Stuttgart in Germany, and there you have 3 rock shelters. Beautiful rock shelters, and they have been all excavated by a man called Bozinski. The site is called Bockstein. Let us look at the material. The material is dated to early Upper Pleistocene. Yes, it's about beginning of Wurm, a little earlier than that, late Eemian. And this side is full of hand axes. Now, what a difference. The whole of Lower Paleolithic Central Europe didn't care for a hand axe. And here you come in Central Europe, Middle Paleolithic hand axes start appearing. Beautiful, large, 16 centimeter long hand axes, beautiful big hand axes, along with development of large number of flake tools, but not a single level of flake, not a single Mousteroid element. Now, here is the development of a Middle Paleolithic of Central Europe, which is totally devoid of Mousteroid element. Very, very close to France, but no Mousteroid element. And a kind of development of hand axes, so it gives a different culture. Let us call it Bocksteinian culture. So Middle Paleolithic of Central Europe is Bocksteinian, which is way apart from Western Europe. It's not Mousteroid. Let us go to north, a little north of Stuttgart, and come close to Hamburg. There are 2 sites. One is called Salzgitterlebenstedt, the other is called Lehringen. Lehringen has a date also, carbon-14 date of 39,000. So it must be very late Middle Pleistocene. Both of them have hand axes and Mousteroid tools. So again, you are reminded of England. Oh, they had hand axes with Mousteroid flake tools. So here in the North Germany, you have a development which is different from Bockstein. Central Europe, a small landmass having varieties within it. So you have Salzgitterlebenstedt and Lehringen up there, and let us go to the east. We come near Munich, and near Munich, there is a site called Mauer. Mauer cave was discovered and excavated by a man called Sotz. And here you have an entirely different development. Again, early Upper Pleistocene date. A development is a new tool type is introduced. There is no level of flake. There is no hand axe. Unlike Bockstein, there is no hand axe, but a new tool where it is very thin but bifacially worked by stone hammer technique. So these are called Blattspitzen. Now, Blattspitzen is a German word. Blatt means leaf, Spitz means point, and en means plural, Blattspitzen. So they are leaf-shaped points, and they are introduced in Middle Paleolithic, of Central Europe. And very close to it, there is another site called Sesselfelsgrotte. Sesselfelsgrotte is discovered and excavated by a lady called Gisela Freund, and it is dated to even Upper Pleistocene. And here the tools are all less than 3 to 4 centimeter. They're very small tools, not leveloid also. And Gisela Freund had no alternative but to give it a fourth name, and she called it pygmalion. Pygmalion means pygmy tools. She couldn't call them microliths because people will think that it is Mesolithic then. She called it pygmy tools. So look at Central Europe. Central Europe has 4 distinct varieties. North you have Salzgitter, and Lehringen, which is very strong musteroid tools with hand axes and cleavers. Then in the west you have what is called Bockstein, where you have hand axes, and with hand axes no level of flake, but flake tools are the normal flake tools. Come to the east and you have Mauer, which has been Blattspitz, no level of tools, and the Sesselfelsgrotte, which is pygmy tools. So here is a conglomerate of 4 varieties of traditions. Remember, we compare with Western Europe. You have 4 Musterians, 1 Gudenus, and 1 Pinhole. So you have 4 there too. But they are all within the ambit of basically Middle Paleolithic characters. Here the Middle Paleolithic character is transgressed because of the fact of hand axe being additionally introduced. In both the cases, Bockstein has hand axe introduced for the first time, and so is Salzgitter, Levenstedt, and Lehringen. Let us go to Balkans. Now, Balkan is very interesting. You're crossing over from Hungary and you come to the little southeast, you enter what is known as the Slovenian mountains, and through Slovenian mountains you enter into Yugoslavia, and of course then through Yugoslavia you enter into what is called Greece. The first site that comes, beautiful rock shelters in Yugoslavia, is called, in the Slovenian mountain, is called Crevna Stijena. Now, Crevna Stijena is a carbon copy of Sesselfelsgrotte. They are again microlithic tools, or micro or pygmy tools, no level of flakes, large number of side scrapers and points, but not leveloid or musteroid. So you start seeing that, well, it's a kind of a regional development which starts from around southeast of Central Europe and start going to the Balkans. Okay, we go further southeast. We come to a site called Asprochaliko in Greece. Asprochaliko in Greece continues to be the same kind of ad hocism of, you can see the core cortex and a little bit of flaking removed, but along with that, there are 1 or 2 blood spits. Now, this is the first time again Mauer variety of blood spits keep infiltrating into even the southeast of Europe. We go further east or further south, we come to a site called Kokkinopoulos, K-O-K-K-I, Kokkinopoulos. And lo and behold, Kokkinopoulos is a carbon copy of French Musterian. I mean, if the Musterians had started from France, they must have had to take a helicopter to come down to Greece, because in the intervening area, there was no musteroid area, I remind you. Bockstein had no musteroid. Mauer had no musteroid. Sesselfelsgrotte had no musteroid. How did they come? Did they take an aeroplane? Now, all the intervening area, no musteroid. Come to the southeast point of Greece, and you have what is called Kokkinopoulos, which is typically musteroid. So here is a scenario which needs to be addressed. I will address it later on. And then with the musteroid tools, there are 1 or 2 blood spits. So the infiltration of the spark that developed at Mauer, the blood spits, seems to go on in southeast of Europe. Let us cross and go into Eastern Europe. There are many other sites, but I'll talk of only 2 sites in Ukraine. One river Dnieper and the other is the river Dniester, and by the side of these 2 rivers have 2 open-air sites. One is called Molodova, the other is called Kostienki. Now, Molodova and Kostienki for the first time presents a kind of habitational remains of Middle Paleolithic of entire Europe. We have habitational structures already developed in Lower Paleolithic in Terra Amata. But in Middle Paleolithic, we have no habitational evidence anywhere except in Molodova and Kostienki. Beautiful ground plan is seen, and in many of these ground plan huts, you find multiple huts, not one. In one hut, there are as many as 17 huts. So it seems that they light a hut, and after that they use another hut, or could be it is very cold in Ukraine, could be they kept the huts to keep themselves alive or keep themselves warm. Now, what is the tool types? Molodova is a site which has excellent musteroid tools, beautiful musteroid tools. You feel as if the people from Combi Grenal has come here and stayed here. Beautiful musteroid tools, so very good points, very good side scrapers, but along with that, couple of these blood spits keep coming. So blood spits, which was for the first time observed in Mauer, keeps percolating down to the southeastern Balkans and also crossover into Eastern Europe. Now, having seen this, we have a question. The questions are many. Let us face one. The one is Middle Paleolithic indigenously evolving everywhere? There are two ways. One, that Middle Paleolithic has evolved from a place, a site, where Lower Paleolithic evolved into Middle Paleolithic, and this Middle Paleolithic spread all over the sites. The other opposition is Lower Paleolithic here, Lower Paleolithic there, and Lower Paleolithic there. Everywhere they have independently evolved into their kind of Middle Paleolithic. Which one is correct? Now, this is almost like a multi-regional theory of human evolution. So, is it true that culture has a multi-regional origin? We don't know. But there are issues. The number one issue, musteroid is so specialized. Musterian tools, anybody can see from a distance and say, oh, this is musteroid. Highly leveloid, beautiful points and so on. And some of the points also has posterior shouldering, which gives it the shape of almost an arrowhead. So if this is so specialized, how come this specialized tool types, which is called musteroid by me, is developed here in France, there in Kokinopilos, down there in Kokinopilos, and up there in Moldova? There are two alternatives. Either accept that Levallois technique developed independently at more than one point. Can we or can we not? I don't know. Or you accept wherever Levallois technique developed, and it specializes itself, it creates a musteroid kind of Middle Paleolithic. Levallois technique was not preferred by the people of Bockstein in Germany, in Stuttgart, and therefore there was no musteroid culture. Levallois technique was not developed by people of Mauer, and therefore they didn't have a musteroid culture. So Levallois technique is the crux, the beginning of a process which leads to a musteroid culture. So if you say that, then multi-regional theory seems to be more acceptable archaeologically to talk about the development of Middle Paleolithic independently at n number of places from their indigenous variety of Lower Paleolithic. So if you have a Lower Paleolithic of Ukraine, it doesn't have to wait for France to come and tell him to become Middle Paleolithic. Ukrainian Lower Paleolithic will develop into Ukrainian Middle Paleolithic. But Ukraine has no Lower Paleolithic. So the Russians have an inferiority complex. They would say, since I don't have a Lower Paleolithic below Moldova, Middle Paleolithic, then these people must have come from outside. So all Russians have an ancestry which is exogenous. They don't like to accept it. So our origin is exogenous. We are not ourselves. We came from outside. So these are issues that can be not solved unless multiple amount of sites are found, and each site have large number of human skeletons, and you can do all kind of analysis to find out whether they are indigenously developing or not. But at the moment, there's the evidence of Kokinopilos, especially the evidence of Kokinopilos and the evidence of Moldova. These two, far away from each other, is strictly showing that no, Levallois technique must have evolved totally independently of each other at different places. And wherever they have evolved independently, they incidentally gave rise to very similar culture. Call it musteroid, call it whatever, but they are similar and they are carbon copy. So this is a very interesting scenario, and it has to be accepted until new finds, new data and new evidences come. Until then, we have to accept that the Middle Paleolithic culture of Europe develops in varieties of shapes. Now let us conclude. But regional development, according to archaeology, is definitely a very vibrant process of differentiations. This can be the main model of our Middle Paleolithic culture. This can be the main moral of understanding the archaeology of dispersal, archaeology of variability, and archaeology of progression and migration. We have taken a rapid survey of the evidences. The evidences themselves don't speak of anything, except when you try to plot them on a larger plane, then it shows that internal variability is intrinsic to the development of civilization. If you can extend it to the Roman period or even the younger periods, you would see that each of the regions developed their own specializations on the imperatives of their adaptational strategies. If that be accepted, then there was no need of seeking one culture having derived from another culture which is across the border. Now, these are issues which can be contested, but the above summary can show that no, regional development has always taken part independently, though there may have been migrations of one trait from one place to the other. Middle Paleolithic, let us look at the chronological limit, 160,000 to 40,000. This is the period, and within this period, this small landmass called Europe, look at the varieties of development that takes place. It needs explanation, and we have no explanation today. We have talked about variability and dispersal of culture, but we shall not forget the point that culture, after all, is the product of human behavior. So who were the people who created the culture? It's a very mute problem that needs to be discussed. If you look at the duration of Middle Paleolithic, it starts from about middle of the warm period called Eemian and half of the cold period, subsequent cold period called Wurm. So there is a part which is in the warm period and there is a part which is in the cold period. A gentleman called Wilbur Smith had talked about Mousterian being of two varieties. One is the cold Mousterian, which is the older one, that is the Eemian period, and the other was the warm Mousterian, which comes from the cold Mousterian from Wurm and warm Mousterian from Eemian. So far so good, but the point is the racial bifurcation that happens, this is the time that the bifurcation that happens from the clade that was the formation of the Homo erectus. It went on for a long time, but the bifurcation took place after this group called early sapien has already separated. This bifurcation in a later period created this race called Neanderthals. Neanderthals have been a point of dispute and discussion for a long time because there are varieties of Neanderthals. But if they ask the archaeologists, we're not surprised because there are varieties in Mousterian culture, so why can't there be the varieties in the authors? We have Neanderthals which are progressive, we have Neanderthals which are conservative, we have varieties of Neanderthals. Some of them believe that Neanderthal was a separate species. Some believe no, it was a separate subspecies. So you have a scenario where Neanderthal variability shows that around 160,000 years to about 60,000, 40,000 BCE, this period time, there was a change in the authorship of human development. And this development was occurring parallelly with a bifurcation that has already taken place and which is called the so-called early sapiens, which has already taken place from the Homo erectus group. So this late bifurcation, some believe it was an adaptation to a specific kind of cold climate of Wurm in Europe. Some believe no, it was a kind of a over-specialization of constrained variety of limited space in which they were intermarrying with each other. But the fact remains that there are variations, and some of the variations in Middle East looks almost like early sapien or sapienized so much that they were called as progressive ones. So you find that the bifurcation of the race is very much evident as much as the bifurcation and dispersal of the cultural variabilities. If you remember, the cultural variabilities within Central Europe, within Germany, is fourfold. You have Salzgitter, Levenstedt, Leiringen, Bockstein, Mauer, Sesselfelsgrund. Each one of them is different. So why can't you have the author of each one of the cultures is different? So the dispersal and origin is a question which cannot be solved right away, and you cannot take it parallelly with the human evolution either. So these are issues which can be solved only when large amount of more data, more skeletons are found. There are some scholars who believe that skeletal evolution should not be confused with cultural evolution, meaning that culture can change within the same race or same physical type. Some believe no, if culture has changed, then the physical type has also changed. Can we say culture changes and therefore brings about a change in the physical type because the marriage system changes? So there are issues, and the issues cannot be solved except for the fact that has to be faced. And the fact remains that there are varieties of Neanderthals. There are a variety of early sapiens which are occurring during this period of 160,000 to 40,000 BCE. This is the period in which you have a large ramification of type. Remember, the period preceding this, that is early Stone Age or Lower Paleolithic, there was only one race. There was only Homo erectus. So you don't have a progressive Homo erectus. So you have a situation where the cultural variability, cultural dispersal, physical variability, physical dispersal is a given fact. You cannot question it. And the reasons of these are, at the moment, we do not have any other ways, but at the moment we can say the reason seems to be differential adaptations in regional variations. Each region developed their own characters, own differential variations, marriage and Mendelian group changes, and therefore a new subtype creates. So a physical type is an emergence out of a cultural type. A cultural specialization takes place, and that creates a kind of isolate which in the course of time creates a new physical type. This could be the only explanation at the moment. But if you start finding more sites from large number of areas which are still not giving any site, for instance Poland. Poland is a complete vacant in Middle Paleolithic. Now if you start finding sites in Poland, possibly we can say how Salzgitter, Leibstedt and Leringen, which are very close to Poland, must have separated as a cold area adaptation in northern latitudes. We do not know. So maybe more sites come and then we'll know. At the moment we have no other alternative but to accept that variation and variability of both culture and physical type is a given fact and not questioned, given fact for Middle Paleolithic of Europe. Thank you.